Good afternoon, everybody. I said good afternoon, everybody. Come on, wake up. You're about to get drunk anyway, so just give me a few minutes. All right, I'm not gonna keep you from your liquor. I promise you that. I won't do that. But anyway, thank you all for coming to this session here. We're going to talk today about public-private partnerships in general. I am honored to be joined on the dais today by three distinguished guests, and we'll talk about them individually, but three learned men from the School of Airport Management. And this is very exciting to have them up here. And I promise you, first of all, thank you all for being here. This is very exciting. And I also want to assure you that your families will be released at the end of this session. So without any further ado, we're just going to go ahead and get into this. It should be fun. I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and then we're going to have each one of our distinguished guests give their viewpoint on today's topic, which is public-private partnerships in the United States. And it's important that we go over this because it's becoming a growing trend here in the United States for airports to consolidate a lot of the important functions about running airports into one overlord or one particular developer. Before we get started, though, I'm going to share some information about myself. Some of you may know already that I've been an airport official in several different cities throughout the years. On a personal note, I am married. My lovely wife is also here in New Orleans, and I think she might even be in the building. But I want to say I'm married. I've got 3 kids. My favorite color is royal blue, by the way. And my favorite sports team is, of course, the Seattle Seahawks. Now, as we move forward here, though, let's talk about the public-private partnerships, and hopefully I can get this thing working. Yes, P3s in general, we call them P3s for PPP. P3s are a form of privatization. And let's review what airport privatization really is. It's the transfer of ownership or management, or both, of an airport to the private sector. So when an airport leases out large tracts or large pieces of scope to one outfit or a group of private outfits, that's in essence a privatization. There are different degrees of privatization, though, and that's really one of the areas I want to focus on for a moment. The Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, set up an airport privatization pilot program that was established in 1996 with their Reauthorization Act, and they expanded it in 2012, eventually to include 10 airports. Chicago Midway was a big part of that. Midway recently went through its 3rd round of attempted privatization, and it looks like this one's going to take. So I think it's going to work. But at any rate, privatization is becoming much more of an accepted way of doing business here in the United States. This is important. All P3s are essentially privatizations in one form or another, but not all privatizations are P3s, and this is an important distinction. P3s are essentially a partial privatization, which typically involves limited scope and is usually represented in some form of an airport lease. The airport will lease something to somebody, and they'll do it for a lot of years. A lot of us who have been concessionaires are familiar with 5-year and 7 and 10-year leases, but these leases typically go a lot longer, 20, 25, even 30 years. A full privatization, on the other hand, is very common overseas and in the international arena, and that means almost a total divestiture of all responsibility and asset ownership on the part of the government, creating what in essence is a private commercial enterprise instead of some sort of a privatization. Is my flag upside down or is it right side up? I see some people looking at me funny. Hopefully it's right side up. Just joking. Typical differences today in P3 activities. So I've summarized them for you here. In the United States, a P3 typically encompasses all non-aeronautical commercial operations like concessions and whatnot, but a lot of times they leave parking out of the equation. And it also involves common area development and maintenance, whereas on the international side, you have those 2 areas, but you'll also have things like terminal building construction, parking, airport operations, and airport security. And the guests that we have up here today are going to provide you a pretty good dichotomy of the different types of privatization. So, but what that does is that it creates here in the United States certain financial challenges, like trying to pay your light bill and you're not getting paid. These financial challenges are essentially high capital investment, which has to be paid for essentially by non-aeronautical revenues. You don't have a lot of other airport sources of revenue with which to repay your capital investment. It also can result in high rents to airport concessionaires. I'm not saying that about all privatizations, but when you have not that many sources, it can really kind of put a lot of pressure on your concessions program. And then finally, U.S. airports typically want debts paid very early in the lease term. If any of us remember our college financial classes, the time value of money is very important here because the airports want to be paid early in the lease term, not at the end. So here are some questions. I'm going to, seed hopefully the audience with some questions. Hopefully at the end of these presentations, you're going to have some questions. Number one, will the FAA ever broaden the P3 scope? That's something that's pretty important because right now it's fairly narrow here in the United States. I think you may know that President Trump supports privatizing air traffic control, believe it or not. So check your files on that one. He actually made a public statement about that as recently as February of this year. How about the airport community? Will the airport community continue to find these P3s appealing? That's also something that we need to think about. Will the interest in the U.S. market from foreign investors continue to grow? And will P3s eventually become more financially appealing? Those are the questions that I have. So that's the total sum of my remarks. If you want this presentation, I'm sure it'll be made available to you. I also have a pretty lengthy appendix of other useful information. But without any further ado, let's talk about the speakers. The first speaker today, good friend of mine, Mr. Patrick Murray, Executive Vice President of SSP America. I've known Patrick for many years, decades, dare I say. I don't want to reveal my age or his in the process, but Pat started his career originally with Al Copeland Investments of New Orleans, yes, New Orleans, at the entry level, where he made it to eventually Senior Vice President. He then moved to HMS Host. At the time it was Host Marriott, but he ran concept development at Host for a number of years. So he's very, very well experienced in understanding how this business works. Pat's married with 3 kids. His favorite color, as opposed to royal blue, is green. And his favorite sports team is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish football squad. Without any further ado, Pat.
Thanks, Paul. I'll try to live up to that expectation. However, I don't know if I know. There we go. So I'll just start out as we are sort of tackling a big topic. Never a dull moment. Just maybe an hour ago, I'm standing outside, and like many of the veterans in here, I'm talking to Bruce Fuhrer, and Bruce looks at me and says, "Gosh, doesn't it feel busy?" I'm like, when didn't it feel busy? You know, the business is somewhat constant. There's always new and evolving things, changes. Some of it's process-driven. Some of it's new players, new teams. And then, there's trends, which, of course, is what we're talking about today, new ways for cities, counties, et cetera, to look at the business overall. So, and a lot of that is rooted in good old-fashioned American ingenuity and creativity. So how do we continue to evolve our business channel to be exciting? And I think one of the catchphrases that many of us would use is innovative. So how are we looking at things differently? How are we a better provider to airports and likewise to the passenger base that uses those? If I go back to when I started in this business now about 15 years ago, the model was pretty straightforward. So you had master operators, so would come in and respond to major RFPs and run an entire terminal. And then you had single site leases that were either, managed by the authority directly or someone else. And then there were developer manager contracts. And those were the 3 principal models that we'd look at in almost every single opportunity. Today, that's ever evolving. Sort of one of the catchphrases everybody uses is hybrid. I'm not sure what hybrid is anymore, but whether it's hybrid, I think Paul used sort of mega as a term in terms of some of the contracts that are being released, but it's all sort of new and different. Airports, municipalities are looking at more creative ways to both be able to increase passenger experience and drive revenue. So one of the trends that sort of relates to P3s is on the heels of several large terminal developments that somehow combine services from companies that combine services, whether it's food, beverage, retail, duty-free, natural things for us, but also things like shoe shine, lounge services, and perhaps other things to manage terminals. The result of that is new partnerships. So I think in this picture, Mike Mulaney is the one on the left with so new partnerships it also breeds innovation. You know, for our own experience at SSP, just coming off of our developed partnership in Chicago, we partnered with an airport operator in Vantage Airport Group and Hudson News, and 3 different companies. We sort of have learned from each other lots of different things about how to put business together, how to look at things, how to be respectful of what others are somewhat specialists in. But I think you're going to see in that setting, there was other competitors too that, you know, formed partnerships, et cetera, and each of us are sort of creating that, what is that niche? And that's one of the more interesting parts of where this entire P3 goes and the subject we're addressing. So, you know, some of that is each of the companies already had diverse talents. So for our business, you know, our tagline is the food travel experts, right? So for us, we're wanting to be in the food business. Well, whether it's duty-free or retail or news and gift or, for that matter, shoe shine, we have to find other partnerships that are going to accomplish those things. And I think you're going to continue to see these things evolve as other opportunities come up, as the marketplace has time to sort of sit back and think about, well, how do I partner to respond to these opportunities? I think, you know, the results of this stuff are yet to be had, right? So there's lots of people in the audience that are either airports that are in the middle of an RFP or about to put an RFP out, or others that have just come through them that may not have all this. So you're going to sit back and evaluate what were the benefits of these things, and you know, what was the result of it? How does what does the term we call the developer, what is that function? And our sort of team, Vantage Airport Group, was fulfilling that responsibility of being someone who helped lead the team. You know, that's something I think that we're going to start to see the other companies that perhaps we call developers also scale out their responsibilities. And today, you know, Air Mall is owned by Fraport, which is an airport operator. So there's going to be other skills that they're able to project out in future RFPs. This is also going to continue to evolve. You know, now, of course, the president's made a lot of statements that Paul reflected on, but airlines themselves are investing in more and more terminal development. As we see that across the country, that's going to change the landscape of what we do, because some of that changes the relationship from a business-to-government relationship to a B2B relationship, and perhaps also further changes the shape of what those businesses look like. So, you know, what does that really mean for all of us? I think it's, you know, it's an exciting business to be in. It's changing all the time. You know, if we think back to some of the trends that we've had just in the last few years, people stopped buying newspapers and magazines, right? There had to be a translation into the now travel convenience market, et cetera. There are going to be other things like that in our business channel. We all have to evolve with that, and we have to be adaptive to the future of what our business channel looks like. So it's all about being prepared to seize that opportunity. And I think for us, you know, in candor, we have to evolve with it, wherever that goes. So, you know, when we, most recently in our partnership with Hudson and Vantage, people call all the time and say, hey, you know, how does that work? I say, well, you know, you have to be open-minded. There are other partnerships in the room too we'd love to be a part of. You gotta be able to look at these things and say, hey, let's try to project out what the future looks like. And ultimately, in the end, you know, we all want to grow our business channel. Fortunately, we're living in some great times. So the road ahead is very promising. So, Mr. Brown?
Thanks, Pat. Very well done. Appreciate that. Thank you. My next speaker reminds me of somebody that I used to work for in one of my less publicized previous employment experiences, the Right Reverend, who used to always say, and he'd say it with emphasis, Paul Brown, you got to inspect what you expect. Otherwise, you get a reject. Can't connect the prospect. I say, sorry, I didn't understand. Paul Brown, did I tell you? Inspect what you expect. This next guy, Ismael Izzy Bonilla, director of General Mitchell International Airport in Milwaukee, is one of those guys who has to do the inspecting. He runs a great property. He's very relevant to what we're talking about today because he has a project that really is at the bullseye of our subject matter. He was born in Puerto Rico, San Juan, to be more precise. He served 20 years in the United States Air Force. So he comes by this airport and airline and aircraft thing very honestly. After the military, he worked for several different places, including Jacksonville's Port and Airport Authority, two separate experiences. Worked also with Vancouver Airport Services and also worked in Broward County in Florida. And immediately prior to working in Milwaukee and running that whole show, he was Chief Operating Officer for Aerostar Investments, which is actually one of the controlling entities in our first United States privatization. So one more thing about Izzy. He's married, he's got one kid. His favorite color is Air Force blue. All right, Air Force blue, not any kind of blue now, Air Force blue. His favorite sports team is, of course, those Green Bay Packers. So welcome the bad man himself, Izzy Bonilla.
Damn. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I also had a crusty master chief one time tell me, Izzy, if you want to be successful, you need to remember this, and that was, what interests your boss should fascinate the bleep bleep out of you. We'll just say we should fascinate the heck out of you, but that's not what old crusty master chiefs usually say. But thank you, Paul. That was a great intro. And we're supposed to be talking about P3s. And as I was listening to Pat's presentation, it's just, I'm going to view it a little bit more as an airport operator, maybe with a little bit of a background from working with Vancouver and Santiago, Chile, and also with working with Aerostar down. And I also spent some time in Frankfurt working with Fraport for an internship. So, when it comes to privatization or partial privatizations, I've kind of been there, done that a little bit. But in Milwaukee, we're trying to do something a little bit different. And maybe as an airport operator coming in, what is it? What's the evolving changes that are happening in our industry? Hey, Paul, which button should I press, man? I think it's, is it the black one? Yesterday we had the same issue. There you go. So we're not going to talk too much about the public-private partnerships. I'm sure that our experts out there in the audience right now know more about P3s than anything else. Pat and Paul kind of talked a little bit about what these P3s are. But as an airport, we all know that funding for a lot of these projects are getting tighter and tighter. So in the United States, it's very difficult for getting full airport privatization. So everything's been morphing. You have operators out there that are doing terminal ops, such in Atlanta or in Sanford. You have companies like TBI and these guys kind of running these terminals. And then you have, of course, what's happening down in San Juan as a full P3 with a 40-year plus lease. So some of the pros about that is that it gives you financial flexibility, brings in outside capital, and that's really what's happening like in Milwaukee. We're, as the federal government gives us less money, as the airlines fight us in the arena in Washington when it comes to our PFCs, and either raising the PFCs or trying to use the PFCs for something a little bit more broad than what we have today, it becomes harder and harder for us to look at outside sources of funding or to get some of our projects completed. So we have to look elsewhere. Now, not every airport's the same. A small airport's going to be very different from a large airport like Chicago or New York. Medium hub airports, some of them fall in that sweet spot where their passenger activity is good enough that it may attract some of these investors. So you look at, of course, savings to the airlines. It's all about these leases that we have, which, we got to start thinking outside the box. We got to start thinking, being a little bit more proactive when it comes to business negotiations. And airlines, and I'm a firm believer that we have to do the same with the airlines. So we have these residual leases sometimes that, kind of tells us that we should be partnering with the airlines when it comes to growth activities or capital investments. But as you know, that sometimes becomes very difficult, and so we move on. Reduction of risk and, of course, fresh ideas. Though some of the cons is that you lose the day-to-day control. I don't believe in, I guess that it all depends on how you would run your program. My firm belief is that we should take our landlord hat off and we should put our advocate hat on. And, it's something that I learned when I was in Fraport. They believed in that. They believe in helping their service providers. I don't like somebody mentioned yesterday, don't like to call it concessions. This is all service. We're all in the service industry. We're here to serve. We're here to serve our passengers, our tenants, and even our own employees. So losing control to me, it all depends on how you would run it. I know I wouldn't lose control. And then, of course, you have maybe possible higher capital costs. So there are different types of P3s. We've already been through them. There's the service contracts. This is nothing new. This industry has been around the United States for a long time. You had, Pat kind of touched on it a little bit about, having a master concession operator, or, we are partnering today with our retail food and beverages. We've been doing it for many, many years. So what's changing? And I think what, Pat had talked about a little bit was, since full privatizations in the United States are becoming harder and harder to come, you have a lot of folks out there with money that are looking at investing that money. And so they're investing in terminals, what's happening right now in other airports, or they're investing in management, or they're investing in some form of activity because they're looking at positioning that money. And so when we had our RFP pre-proposal meeting, I was very surprised to listen to a bunch of accents over there that were a little bit different from Wisconsin or the United States. We had folks from Germany show up. We had ADP, Aéroports de Paris, show up. We had, of course, the folks from Airmall. We had pretty much all the players, and we had some international players coming in to Little Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to look at the possibility of partnering with us. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that is. You have management contracts, you have developer financing options, parking garages, rental car. Why can't you partner with some parking garage operators and do some type of rewards where if they do well and they save you the money, make you the money that you need to make, why not compensate these people? That's a partnership. That is in a way, that's a business arrangement that many airports should be looking at. And of course, there's full privatization. I just put a little quick list of why we seek these private partnerships, which I've been kind of talking a little bit about it. We see the landscape of the federal and state governments getting lower and lower when it comes to financing. And I've got 5 runways in Milwaukee, and those things are expensive to maintain, especially when you have, like we had yesterday, almost 1.5 feet of snow. I mean, just the de-icing solutions that we have to put out there are costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. We have, there's restrictions by some of the governments, local governments, on what we call privatization or partial privatizations. We need to invest in other areas of the airport. I'm looking at building an international terminal Milwaukee just started operations to Guadalajara, Mexico, and we are getting some activity from some European carriers also. So operator versus developer, what fits you? What would fit your airport? Of course, if you talk to the developers, they say that, they're the best thing since sliced bread. You talk to an operator, they're saying there's the best thing out there for your airport. It really comes down to what is your fit? What are you looking for? Why are we doing it? Well, as you can see by this picture, apart from Izzy's airplane hanging out in the rafter over there, it's basically we have a huge mall area. And this thing was built before 9/11. And, it looks great. You got ping pong tables. We have a museum. We have a lot of stuff hanging around the airport, but it's pre-security. And it doesn't take a rocket science, even though airports are now becoming smarter. They're measuring things. We're using metrics. And that's really where the good airports are getting their information. They're seeking out that information and measuring things. And I'm also a firm believer on that. But it didn't take rocket science to see that we were losing money in our pre-security. So in order to, I'm gonna let Manuel talk about San Juan. So I'll skim through that. LaGuardia, everybody knows about LaGuardia and what's going on over there with Vantage. Austin, they were looking at, they've actually kind of privatized one of their south terminal. And they partner with a Lone Star Airport Holdings to do that. I'm going to go through these real quick. Okay, so MK, concession redevelopment. So what are we doing? What we're doing is we're trying to build a central security checkpoint. We have 3 terminals, 3 checkpoints. We're looking at building 1 security checkpoint. And a lot of you guys are sitting over there going like, well, what's so special about that? Normally, airports would build that central security checkpoint and then allow the service providers to go ahead and build, their post-security offerings. What we're looking at right now is having those service providers build that central security checkpoint for us. I know it's a risky plan. And you guys are all business folks. You know that you have to look at your return on investment. You have to look at, what are the risks in doing this. But we believe that, there is a great opportunity for someone to come over here and do that for us. And what we want to do is we talked about yesterday about sense of place, about the experience. Millennials today, they're totally different. A passenger, they're looking for that experience. They want to enjoy that experience. Business travelers, we have over 5 Fortune 500 companies in Milwaukee, and we have a lot of Fortune 100 companies in Milwaukee. So they also are looking for a different experience. So we're looking to combine all that and bring in that sense of place and that sense of being cheesehead. Did I say that? I do have one in my office, though. So we're looking at enhancing that program with lounges, maybe spas. Why not? Let's think outside the box. Let's get out of that cookie cutter approach of just putting a grab and go in a corner and saying, that's your offering. Get out of that mentality. And we need to start thinking as airport operators and airport directors. We have to start pushing back. We got to start working with our business partners, and we have to start looking at what's working, what would work, and what is the new thing to do. So we're doing that. We're trying to get that done. So the developer is going to invest in the base building, the common areas. The concessions manager will manage all aspects of the program itself. This is what we're looking for. The concession operator or service provider will operate the full food, retail, and service offerings. They will also be we will be basically administrating that lease. Right now what we're doing is we got the RFP out in the street. It's opening up on the 25th of May. It's still not too late. I'm putting a shameless plug right here. It's still not too late for you all to get together and look at this opportunity. These are some of the things that we're asking them to do, to design, to construct, to finance this checkpoint, to move our museum. We have a museum at Mitchell Airport, and to develop all the post-security and pre-security offerings that we have. This is in a nutshell what they would do. The term is about 20 years or so. And we're also going to put in there that, you have to keep it fresh. And I've been in airports before where they've had long-term leases with some food and beverage folks, and they, on year 15, it was getting pretty bad. And so we have to keep the offerings fresh and investments fresh. This is another picture of our mall area looking into our Concourse D. As you can see, pretty much everything that's pre-security is not making money except for one, and I'll let you, one, maybe two, and I'll let you guess which one that may be. So that's a picture of our mall area. So what are we looking for? We're looking at, it's basically, we have one thing that we can negotiate, and I can't do that without the airlines, is we have a minimum annual guaranteed, but we realize that for the first 5 years, you need to recover some of your investments, so we're not going to be asking for anything after that. But then after that, after year 6, then we're looking at some form of annual escalation to be negotiated. We're looking at some type of revenue share percentage, and that's all negotiated in the possible lease. Thank you very much for your patience, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Izzy. Awesome. Our next and final speaker, very, very interesting speaker indeed, Mr. Manuel Gutierrez Sola. And I want to tell you a little story about when I first met him. I did a project for him, my firm did, late last year, and it required me to, unfortunately, had to go all the way down to Mexico and, had to go to Cancun, my kind of job. And we talked business for a while, and then Manuel looks at me and says, "Amigo, ¿tiene hambre?" I said, "Oh, tiene hambre." I'm working on my Spanish. I knew that. "Oh, yeah." He said, "Yeah, I'm hungry. He goes, He says, "¿Está listo para tener algo diferente?" I said, "Something different? Yeah, sure, I'm ready for something different. Let's have it. Let's do it," right? So we got in the car. We went to some restaurant right there on the coast. Beautiful, right in the hotel zone. Just fantastic. Servers everywhere. Everybody dressed wonderfully. We ate outside, could hear the ocean surf. And he said, "You like tacos?" I said, yeah, I like tacos. Sure, I sure do. And he brought them out. They started bringing out tacos. And I don't mean like Taco Bell now, okay? Not that kind of taco. These were lovely, just little tiny ornate tacos. And I was like, wow, that looks fantastic. What's in there? So I just grabbed one, and I threw some sauce on it, and I started eating. I said, man, this just tastes fantastic. It was more tender than the tenderest filet mignon. It was just beautiful. I was like, this is unbelievable. I ate 3 of them like that. He said, "¿Quieres más?" I said, "Yeah, give me more. Bring out more tacos. Come on, bring them out." So they kept bringing them out, and I just kept eating them. And then I said, man, I wonder what this is. And I said, "Manuel, what am I having here? What is this anyway? It tastes so good. It's got to be like a filet mignon or something like that." He said, "Amigo, en sus manos tiene la lengua de res." I said, "Oh, lengua de res. Oh, I like the sound of that. That sounds pretty good. Bring on more lengua de res. Me gusta." So they brought out more lengua de res. And then I turned to the waiter and I said, "Hey, what does lengua de res mean again? I can't remember what that means." He says, that's beef tongue." Beef tongue! But it wasn't that bad. It's fantastic. What a great meal. I want to thank you. You're a great host. Manuel Gutierrez Sola is fantastic. He's a dynamic manager of commercial programs across the oceans, and now he brings that talent to us in the United States. He joined Asur Aerostar in the year 2000. He runs all the commercial development for Asur, which runs, believe it or not, 9 airports in Mexico. However, with Aerostar, in that partnership, he's implementing a full airport transformation of San Juan's Luis Muñoz Marin Airport. It involves redoing all the design of the terminals and everything one by one, and it also involves changing the commercial strategy for that airport. Manuel is a bachelor, but he's got 3 kids. His favorite color, Well, that's blue again. But his favorite team, his sports team, is those Dallas Cowboys. So without, Manuel, please come to the podium.
Well, thank you, Paul. Good evening, everyone, and that's totally true about the tongue tacos. That's really a story in my background. I also was in the shopping center industry, and I remember when I was taking the guys of Gap, and we flew to Guadalajara. I was going to take them to a very nice restaurant and say, no, we want to go something very, very casual and local. So we went to this taco place right on the sidewalk. It was not even a restaurant, it was a sidewalk restaurant outside. And I took them as well to have some ton tacos in Guadalajara, and they were amazed of the flavor and all that. They would say, what is this again? So they were calling TTT, Tomás Ton Tacos. That was the name of the guy who was running the shop. So the next day I say, okay guys, we had this tongue tacos. What do you want to have tonight? Again, I said, you know what? We're going to go there again. And so we went there again to have these Tomás Ton Tacos. So I also took my friend here to have that flavor of tongue tacos. That it's amazing, but he did enjoy it as well, very much. Well, anyway, what here is to talk a little bit about PPPs. The PPPs has been kind of a tendency a lot of in Europe and in Latin America, and I think it's since the pilot program of the FAA started here in the U.S. as well with Midway. It has become more popular, or it's a tendency that we will be experiencing in the next years here in the U.S. What we did in Mexico in 1998, it was when this program also, as a pilot program, started in Mexico. It was the privatization of the southeast airports of Mexico that I introduced this word of privatization. Really, it traduces into a lease program, into a lease agreement between the government and the private sector. No? So we started with it was a consortium called ITA, and ITA was formed by Spaniards, French, Danish, and Mexicans. 4 of them. Each one with a 25%, holding only a 15% of what it is Asur today. And that's how Asur started with winning this tender, this bid for this PPP in Mexico for 9 airports, including, of course, Cancun, the crown of the jewel that we have in that group. And well, it was to tell you these success stories that we got those airports in 1999. So we started with them, reconverting all of them, investing a lot of money in them, taking the authority out of doing any more CapEx investment in these airports. And in the other way, we had to put a big investment at the beginning, and then after on the next years, we're also added to that a concession fee that it's remaining we have a lease contract agreement with the Mexican authority for 50 years. We are still remaining 36 years, but in these 34 years to go, and these 16 years, we have done a lot with these airports. And this includes that when we took over Cancun, we had only 6 million passengers. Today, last year, we crossed over the 21.6 million passengers. The commercial income, the revenues were very, very low. We closed the year with more than $120 million in revenue, in commercial revenue for the airports. This does not include any aeronautical income. This is all out of the box totally, and this controlled really by the authority. If we have a maximum amount of money that we can make in the year, and if we already get more money than that, we have to stop charging that money to the airlines or give it back to them. So it's a program that really helps a lot the airlines. It's capped, but it's not capped the part of the commercial program revenue. So that's where we really get really more profit for the group. In the year 2000, right after taking the airports of Mexico, we did a privatization. I mean, we went to the New York Stock Exchange. So we have been in the stock exchange for this September will be 16 years being in the stock exchange market in New York. And we had a very successful stock. We started with $14 a share, and today we are over 160. So it has been a nice story to tell that we have been growing and growing. And today, part of the problem that we have as a public company traded in New York is that we have to continue investing in airports itself. So that's why we are looking for more opportunities. And 6 years ago, almost 5.5 years ago, we went to several PPPs out in the market, like Brazil, Guarulhos, where we lost that one. And then we also participated LaGuardia, we lost that one. We went JFK Terminal 5, we lost that one. And we have been trying. We went into the San Juan bid 5 years. We started 5.5 years ago. So, and we were awarded with San Juan, which is the first, where we were awarded as a first private group to run an airport with the FAA in North America. So we got this certification almost in January 2013. We were awarded with winning the bid in 2012, maybe in June, July, and then that process for signing the lease agreement and involving all the airlines, and it was a very hard process to get all the things together and then get the certification with the FAA and all that. So it took us about 8 months to get it together, and we got the airport of San Juan in February 2013, and I can tell you that has also been a success story. We invested at the beginning because the airport had a big debt, so we paid for that for the beginning, 615 million, and then we have also invested through these 4 years close to $250 more million in that airport. But now you can see the transformation that we have done to the airport. And not only in that, we have, when we got the airport, they were doing a very short amount of commercial income, and we have been able almost to, we have now at the closing the past year, we did more than 3.5 times what they were doing when they were running the program. So it has been also quite good to be investing in San Juan and changing the full program of San Juan and turn it into a success story. So we have a contract, a lease agreement, also with the authority of Puerto Rico for a 40-year lease. And they were losing a lot of money in that running that airport. It was the airport was pretty in very bad conditions. That's why we had to invest a big amount of money, and today they have, a state-of-the-art airport that you can compare to any airport in the U.S. Puerto Ricans are now proud of the entrance and exit of their main airport in the island, so we are very happy about that as well. So I think that whoever has been in Puerto Rico lately, you can see that if you have gone back and forth, or if you have been at the airport of Cancun. That I'm sure that many of you guys have visited Cancun, and if you have not done it, please take a trip to Cancun. You're going to enjoy that place. Is awesome as well, and don't forget the tongue tacos. So there's a lot of benefits also in doing these PPPs because the government really stops doing CapEx, and we us and operators, we are taking the full risk of investment and changing the program and doing due diligence and dealing with authorities. Like in the case of San Juan, we had to do also, we kind of what is happening in Milwaukee, that you had several checkpoints, 3 checkpoints, and we converted that into a central checkpoint as well, so we could maximize and take the flow of the passengers into a mall area and turn it into more into a mall where we could make more commercial income. So we did that, and we changed the whole structure of the airport, and we did all the dealing with TSA and FAA in order to change the security checkpoint. And today, the program is running quite good. All the gates are closer for the passengers as well. It's a very nice walkthrough that will take you around Terminal A, B, or C. They had Terminal A, B, C, and D. We shut down Terminal D and E because the amount of square feet that this airport had, it was humongous, and a big part of that airport was not in use, so why to keep it running and paying bills for electricity, water, security, and all that. That was really killing the business, and the authority was paying a lot of money for that. So, telling another or more stories about Cancun. This is part of Terminal 3 that we had been having a big trouble or problems that we have been growing. That this is very weird in the industry, that we have been growing in amounts of 2 digits per year for the last 4 years. So, and this means that today we have been increasing passengers in almost in an amount of 2 million passengers, additional 2 million passengers every year. So this is a new area of the food court in Terminal 3, where we added 6 gates for wide bodies in order to have enough space for the passengers, because we have been getting very crowded. Our goal is to turn flyers into buyers, and that means increasing commercial revenue. And we do a lot of walkthroughs also with the duty-free when we have a lot of international passengers. And we try to do a lot of innovation to bring new brands, new concepts to the airport. Like I remember we were at the ARN in San Diego 2 years ago, and I was with my colleagues of Meta, and we were thinking of what restaurant to bring into this into this new area at Terminal 3. So they were speaking with Guy Fieri of Food Network, and we went to Vegas to see this guy and check the experience in Vegas of the Guy Fieri. So they convinced Guy Fieri to come into Mexico for the first time. He had never been out of the U.S., so he came to Mexico. That was his first outside restaurant. And then he came not only to Mexico, to Cancun, and not only to Cancun, but inside the airport of Cancun. And we had experienced a very good experience for the passengers. They just love to have Guy Fieri restaurant at the airport of Cancun. And this kind of new concepts that we're trying to bring and to be trendy, and also to be changing these concepts now and then for the airport, because we also believe that passengers that are coming in and out on a regular basis, they get bored of having the same stores all the time at the airport. So you have to be refreshing. And if you have a long-term contract with let's say with the F&B operators or with the duty-free and all that, we also like to have 5-year renovation or facelift or whatever, so in order to have a new face for the passengers again. No? So we are, as I told you, we are having our big problem in Cancun is that we have a big amount of passengers. By the end of this year, in the last quarter of this year, we will be opening the new Terminal 4, that in this first phase will allow 7 million passengers, but this terminal is intended to be on the next few years, 25 million passenger terminal. So, and this is all investment that it's done by Asur, or private. We don't get any money from the federal government in these cases. All the money is invested by the private equity, by Asur. So what I can tell you is that really this PPPs, it's for us has been really a success stories to tell, and we would like to participate in them in the coming years. We believe it's going to be something that's going to be coming and trendy and popping up very often here in the U.S., not only as a full as a full operation of the airports, like in these cases that now we're participating in Boston, only in the commercial program. We are also doing the same in Milwaukee. We're participating on the investment of whatever it requires to do the construction of the checkpoint and then taking over the commercial program for a period of 20 years. In the case of Boston, it's a very short period, it's only 10 years. So this all depends, but I think that there's a lot of opportunities for groups, national or international, to participate in this PPP. And what I can tell you, to go in and bid, it's a very good business for both parties, from the private sector and the public sector. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'll be here to answer as well. Thank you, Paul, team.
Thank you, Manuel. It was awesome. We do have limited, but enough time for a few questions. Any questions on today's material? Directly in front and then behind him. Yes, please. Oh, we have here comes Andy with the mic. Thank you, Mr. Talajon. Appreciate that.
Hi. Okay. This is for Manuel. Do you have any
Yes.
Hello? Do you have any criticisms or an assessment of the airport privatization program that you participated in with San Juan? Because while San Juan may be a success story, the other airports that have gone down that path have not, that those deals didn't finish. So I was wondering, maybe is that program actually not a success despite your success with San Juan?
I don't know if I get the question correct, but I think that the process like Midway had different problems that we didn't have in Puerto Rico. We have been involved in several PPPs in different biddings. Some of them have not been very clear, and or the bases were not very clear, or they do not work properly, or they have a lot of politics involved, and that's when they do not work out correctly, I think, or not as you wish. So, but I can tell you that the process in Puerto Rico was very clear. They did a very nice job, whether the authorities, aeronautical authorities, as well as the government authorities in Puerto Rico. It was very well managed, very clear for us, very fair, which is something that you're really looking for, because all these processes of bidding, they require a lot of time, and many times it's a big investment that you're doing, not only in time but also in money, and hiring consultants, architects, and you have to run a lot of things, and you have to be doing lobbying and tripping, you have to be flying in and flying out trips, hotels. You do a lot of investment, and what you would like to see is a very clear process, no?
Well, I like to add that, I don't know if this thing is working, but I like to add that basically it's, we're north of us in Canada, you've seen successes in privatization, and in south in Mexico, they've done the same thing. But we really need to change the mindset in the United States when it comes to that type of privatization. The FAA is kind of limited, the amount of what airports can privatize. The government has always had these regulatory issues on board, but if we ever are going to go down that road, we probably need to make some changes in the format, the governmental format on what is privatization here in the United States. And who knows, nobody knows what's going on with this administration, but if this may be a good opportunity also to try to see if we can expand on that program. Not, like I said, not all airports are going to be eligible for it, but right now it's so limited on who can participate anyway.
Izzy, isn't it also that, just like your program, that term partial is kind of critical? It's what Paul brought up. You have one segment. What Manuel was talking about is privatizing the entire airport operation, everything to do with running the the tower and the airfield. That somehow seems like a pretty distant thing for most U.S. airports. But I think what we're really talking about is component parts of that, and that might be easier for municipalities to bite off and sell politically.
Right, I agree. But now I just read in the news that there's an airport in Illinois that they're looking at privatizing that airport. The state of Illinois is actually looking at privatizing that full airport, full private operation. So I think that you're right. The full privatization aspect of operating everything from airside, landside, service, and everything else, those are limited at this point. You see the onesies and twosies going on over there. But now, like I mentioned before, is the opportunity for us to kind of look a little bit and partner in what really generates the revenues, which is everything from parking to rental car operations, and of course, service provided industry, which is the food and beverage and retail. So that's where the opportunities are coming.
One thing is that although we have been managing the full airports, the only thing that we don't manage even in Puerto Rico or Mexico, it's the air operations. That's always controlled by the government, and we believe that should be like that. You don't want to control that at all, no? That should be.
Yeah, tell that to Trump.
Good point. The gentleman directly behind, yes, sir.
Is this working? So first of all, thank you for the presentations. They were very insightful. My question is a bit following through on the first one. We've heard a lot about the dichotomy between operator, developer. We heard a lot about leasing terminals, specific development in specific airports. But PPPs, what about making them less public but more private, and bringing a bit of the European model where you have full BOT contracts, where an airport operator operates both the airfield, the terminals, the air bridges, everything, does the investment and then returns it to the state who owns the land at the end of the contract. What's holding up the United States from going in that direction? Thank you.
That's a pretty good question. Guys, you want to?
I thought that was directed to you.
Yeah. What's
No
holding,
hablo
right?
inglés.
Paul, you can go ahead with that one.
I think that's kind of similar to what everybody was just talking about. I mean, I think there's going to have to be. I am intrigued by that type of project. I would like to see an example of a full privatization, but you're looking at several things. The capital investment that's going to be required, and in order to pay it back, the FAA is going to have to get into this thing and actually expand the scope. It's going to have to be a 50-year program. I would love to see something where we could have a privatized effort, a full privatized effort. But what I don't want to see from a concessions perspective, which is my area of expertise, is so much pressure being put on just non-aeronautical revenues to pay back the capital investment. So there has to be a lot more freedom in that. But I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that evolve. I guess I'll be going to Washington at the end of this conference to lobby for this. But I would like to see a few examples to see whether or not we could pull it off in this country.
I guess to answer your question, it's like every airport is, the jurisdictions around here, for example, in Milwaukee, the county owns and operates the airport. The county does not want to privatize the full operation of the airport, so that's fine. If they don't want to do that, that's great. So, but the question about taking the full operation, it's going to be very difficult because counties, cities, states, they really don't want to release the ownership part of the property. They don't mind leasing some of it, and they do that today. But in order to expand it to like what Midway was trying to do and what happened in Puerto Rico, it really takes a big effort between the airlines. A lot of times the airlines fight back, and they just, I know in San Juan, they almost, gave up their soul just to get approval from the airlines, because the airlines were fighting back on that, even though technically they're into the privatization. They have run a business, but they're really skittish about full privatizations. But so between the government, the airlines, and local governments, it's very difficult to actually make it easy. But I think collectively there's got to be a change, and it's got to come from high to low.
Okay. All right. With that, I want to thank our panelists for being here. You guys really did a fantastic job with a difficult topic. I also want to thank our beneficent ARN overlords for the chance to address this topic in such a meaningful and thoughtful manner. And I want to thank you for being here. And enjoy yourself this evening. Don't drink too much, but hopefully we'll see each other at the bar. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.